back into the indie hole I go, mostly because I've owned Deadbolt since its release, played a bit of it, and then dropped the game for unknown reasons. Do not ask me how many games are in the backlog because of this. I say as I still need to get back to Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, and Nier Automata, and Persona 5 Strikers, and Blasphemous, and the Arc series, and Dark Rise Fantasia, and Code Vein, and my replay of Deus Ex Human Revolution, and, well, you get the point. Maybe someday for the rest of those titles, but not now. Like any indie developer, the spark comes from a small group or singular person, in this case the former, childhood friends Paul Morse and Duncan Drummond, two Seattle boys who've been friends since the 3rd grade. A lot of this will read pretty standard, and since most of the interviews with the two center around Risk of Rain, there isn't a lot to grasp around their personal life. The most I can gather is that they enjoyed playing video games together, leading to them wanting to make games. No joke, that's almost word for word what Morse says in an interview with Game Rant. I've known Duncan since elementary school, 3rd grade. We've always been friends, and we've always been interested in games and played games together. Neither went to university, however, with game development as their chosen career path. Paul picked up finance while Duncan mechanical engineering. A lot of this information about their early lives comes from Molly's, no, not the best friend one, interview with Paul and Duncan, where we can also glean that the decision for the two to make a game was because of their love of MapleStory and inspiration from the Binding of Isaac team. The original Binding of Isaac was spearheaded by one of the original Team Meat members, Edmund McMillan. Super Meat Boy and subsequently Binding of Isaac proved that you didn't need a big team to make a good or even best-selling game, so latching onto that idea using roguelikes as a basis as long-term progression wouldn't be an issue, and skimming a bit from League of Legends to familiarize players to a new game, the original Risk of Rain was born. A glowing review from Total Biscuit ensured the game's place as an indie darling, effectively kicking off Paul and Duncan's career as the developer Hopoo Games. Incidentally, the time it took to make Risk of Rain would prove to be vital for the duo's next game and the subject for today, Deadbolt. When asked by TechRaptor why Deadbolt was a massive departure from Risky Rain, Duncan answers with, "It was intentionally a big departure. Mentally, working on Risk of Rain for so long made me want to work on something else for a change. That's why every aspect is different. It's not arcadey, it's handcrafted stages, story-based, slow and methodical, and over-the-top violent. I wanted to try designing something different so I can learn as a designer, coder, and artist." Out with the game inspirations, in with movies like John Wick and Leon the Professional. What was the major change, however, between the two titles was that Deadbolt wouldn't be procedurally generated, meaning the duo would be challenging themselves for this new venture. Seeing a 2016 release on Steam, with following releases on consoles like the Vita and Switch, Deadbolt would prove to be another hit on the road to Hopoo's biggest game yet, Risk of Rain 2. But that is a story for another time, and probably just as short as this one. Anyway, I've owned the Steam version of the game since, I think, its original release, so that is the one we'll be tackling. Okay, there is a story within Deadbolt, but it is mostly told through mission briefings, intel pickups, cassettes, and minimal spoken dialogue. Functionally speaking, Deadbolt airs closer to not having a story because the writing favors objective rather than development. There is a through line with Ibzan and his relationship with the candles and being a Reaper, but it's mostly implication and doesn't leave that much of an impact, at least to me, because of the threadbare nature of a plot. That said, the lack of a story or a definitive one doesn't falter the game, and one thing I think Deadbolt does well with is crafting mini-stories via the gameplay. There's a number of ways to tackle missions, from Stealthy Boogeyman to Blood-Drenched Killer, giving each mission its own feel to the point of taking the role of a narrative. The best stage to encompass this unusual form of storytelling is the sniper duel with Val. For the most part, you've been the hungering cat feasting upon the rat. That's flipped around as now you have to duck and dodge between cover and dark rooms to avoid a bullet through the dome. Yet there are a few ways to throw off Val's aim. You can take the methodical approach of cover to reach light switches and avoid her fire, or go in guns blazing and hope to wean off her shots. Choosing a silenced weapon, I could shoot out lights without attracting enemy attention, leading to some cool non-diegetic moments. This makes up a bulk of Deadbolt, as character pathing and enemy attention isn't always set in stone. Sometimes a ganger might react in a way you didn't expect, leading to a situation becoming even hairier if you weren't expecting a rogue ghoul to come in uninvited. And even little set pieces earmark the stages, like reinforcements arriving leading to a standoff, or tricking a number of demons with a microwave for a simple kill. While the overall narrative is minuscule, the physical, as in gameplay, narrative means each stage and encounter will leave its mark. In a way, this is reminiscent of Risky Rain in that the overall encounters you go up against make up the narrative as opposed to an actual story. Before getting to the pixel graphics or even the animation, let me begin this with the highlight of Deadbolt: sound and lighting. Both play an integral part in setting the mood of the game, as one directly affects the other. The backdrop to Deadbolt is a pulsing synth and techno bop that recedes into quiet moodiness, seemingly inspired by the likes of John Wick's soundtrack. The stages themselves are home to high-energy bangers like This Parrot Is No More, but also moody and foreboding ditties like Blood on the Dance Floor. Each track creates an establishing theme or tone to go with the level, like fighting through a demon-filled garage or slinking through some gangbanger's hideout. Escalation is important to the OST, as it is only in later parts of the game when you start getting the bumping techno to highlight the carnage, and yet Chris Totolo knows how to reel back, to let his music unwind the player and make them relax. The singular ongoing theme to the game, Now I Am Become Death, the safe house theme, really captures the vibe of gathering one's thoughts before heading back out into the night for a bit of the ultraviolence. It is hard to pick which exact track captures the heart of Deadbolt, as all of them play well on the ears. Even though I've broadly described the OST as mostly synth splashed in with some somberness, there are a few twangy and jovial tracks to spice things up. Where this all comes together is when you hear the soundtrack in action, where the Reaper shifts the background music of a stage either to be in your face or muffled and far away. Each time you begin a level, you start outside near the Reaper's car with whatever backing track distant and slightly drowned out by the ambience of the world. It feels as if the waking world away from what will happen in the buildings and locations the Reaper has found himself in has encroached past its boundaries. Or maybe the opposite. That the natural world isn't one the Reaper operates in, thus the calm serenity that drowns out the music, as if he, and by extension us, find what lies outside of duty to be white noise. Our affairs are not there. Instead, we have purpose in the belly of the many clubs, drug dens, and warehouses, where the music plays loudly and keeps us in the zone. In turn, this creates an interesting dynamic as many stages have both inside and outside areas, so it is fully possible to transition from the blare of the OST into its muffled version. In this aspect, it works like smelling salts, an anchor to get your bearings, a breath of fresh air to plan your next move, in the same way that after you beat a level and have to return to car, the distant melodies act as a calming reminder that you completed your mission. Music can be a powerful tool in the same vein that a good story or gameplay can strengthen themes or ideas or even present them. It's an aspect of presentation that can be a bit tricky to pull off because you don't have the safety nets of language when it comes to story or interactivity when it comes to gameplay. And while you can tell a story with music, see Pink Floyd's The Wall or any other concept album, most don't rely upon instrumentals carrying the whole load. That's what's fascinating about the Deadbolt soundtrack in that, like the gameplay, it tells an unconventional story in the absence of a traditional narrative. By far my favorite detail in the presentation, however, is the usage of light. Acting as a core gameplay mechanic that I will cover in that tab, light can be summarized as danger. If a room is bathing in light, you are exposed. Everyone and everything can see you, and because Mr. Bones is as sturdy as a wet paper towel, don't expect to live very long in the cover of light. In the dark, meanwhile, you are practically invisible and inaudible as long as you approach enemies from behind. Where this manifests itself in the presentation is that light and shadow are physical concepts within the world. When moving from a dark room to a lit one, little bits of light will peer into the dark room, potentially giving away your position. It can lead to these moments where light shafts pierce into a darkened space, creating an aura of uncertainty that makes traipsing around in the darkness that much harder. Light works realistically, staring at you in the face the entirety of your time with Deadbolt, and different types of light sources generate varied hues of light. Most light bulbs and fixtures paint the world in a sterile whitish yellow, but natural lighting like fireplaces and candlesticks grant a warm orange hue to a locale like the Reaper's apartment, which gets turned upside down come Home Sweet Home, the final level, as while everything in the house is lit by fire, the house is not a home. Some stages even have colored lighting like the Demon's Bar drowning in a seedy red, or the Royal Nightclub's a dim purple. Because these are a lower contrast compared to regular lighting, it makes it harder to discern the light from shadow, blurring the lines of safety and danger in a cool way. It's the ace in the hole. As compared to the actual graphics, it actually stands out. This is not me saying that the character designs are bad or off, far from it. For a simple design, the Reaper's personality is embodied by his design. He's slightly posh with his trench coat and clearly expensive car, but the skull mask screams that he isn't someone to fuck with. Each of the enemies also flesh out what type of gang they're a part of, from street-level thugs to emergent extremists. The problem lies in the category. A pixel art indie game? Extremely bold of you. It's this weird ground for me in that I like pixel art, particularly ranging from the era of the GBA back when Pokemon gave a damn, but an indie game deciding to wear the guise of the art style bores me to tears. Like a eunuch, it doesn't get a rise out of me because I know how flaccid the art style is within the indie sphere. Stuff like Braid and Fez come to mind, two games that reek of faux retro because of their pixel art graphics. I honestly feel like Squidward in this instance, and it sucks because I know this is a personal idiosyncrasy and this game has overall great presentation. My gripe is aimed at the medium as a whole because it's so easy to put up the front of sprite work without attention to detail, and Deadbolt just so happens to be the way. Which, again, Deadbolt has great attention to detail. Bodies don't disappear when you kill an enemy, and you see the aftermath of each level when you are through with it. You can see exactly where the height of combat was with the blood splatters, and enemies do suffer from limb damage like having heads blown off or arms missing. This does play a part in the gameplay, as dead bodies can inadvertently soak up damage to the point that you can completely chunkify a corpse, which adds that bit more to the stages. Rounding out, I guess, is the sound. 'Tis alright. Guns sound like they should and have impact. It's one of those less noticeable things, especially compared to the rest of the picture that Deadbolt paints. A bloody, gruesome one shifting between light and shadow. Deadbolt is a strategy shooter wherein the name of the game is to clear a stage out of enemies, find objective items and details, and sometimes both. For once, I'm bringing up what happens when you beat the game first, as only on New Game Plus do higher difficulties unlock, giving you access to hard once you beat normal. Think of it like Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth, as if you want to go up against a Legion of the Damned on hard, first you have to take out a mob on normal. No jumping directly to that Legion. That said, Deadbolt is on par with the likes of previous stars of the show Hotline Miami and Max Payne. There's a reason why I specified strategy shooter at the top. Our Reaper is a fragile one, foregoing calcium for a steady diet of death and decay. What that means is a stray breeze will kill him, never mind the goons out for his blood. Dying is something you'll do a lot unless your soul hasn't been weighed down by Earth's gravity. But since I'm assuming most of my viewers still live on our blue ball, when you die you return back to the start of the stage, bringing me to the level structure of the game. Before each stage begins, besides the soft prologue, which just dumps you into a level, you start in the Reaper's apartment, where he can take stock of cassette tapes, randomly dropped by enemies I might add, that detail the undeath of some of the gangs he has to deal with, look at previous assignments to replay them, visit Charon to buy new weapons, and most importantly, speak to his fireplace to get a new assignment. This happens most of the time in between each stage, so get used to the dialogue screen where you pick certain items to learn more about them. After that, off to the level you go from the assignment board. Stages are condensed affairs. Not too big that you'll be shot off screen, but not too small so there are still surprises. Off of keyboard controls, WASD is your movement, E is the use key, and a mouse aims and fires. Pretty simple stuff, really. But before engaging with combat, take note that you can only use your fists or a melee weapon when pressing left click. To ready your gun or throwable, you have to hold down right, then press left. Akin to aiming down sights, so to say. Where this simplicity shines for the controls is the interactivity with the levels. While each stage is either a large building or set of buildings, all are separated into rooms, usually by doors, though sometimes with vents and air shafts. Using a door is as simple as pressing E, but unless you like the Swiss and their cheese, triumphantly walking into a lit room with a dude in it is a recipe for Swiss. R is the last function key for the game, as you can knock on doors with it. Relaying a bit of Max Payne into Deadbolt, while the enemies you face are numerous and have pinpoint accuracy, the Reaper, instead of shoot dodging, has trickery and the shadows on his side. Noise and light play a heavy role in how you deal with threats, as most guns can be heard when fired, bringing enemies closer to the source of noise, melee scuffles can be loud enough for others to hear, and light reveals all. Back to the door example I presented, let's say that the room is fully lit and has two goons inside it. Sure, you can barge in gun for hire style, trusting your hand-eye coordination, or you can knock on the door. This will drag the attention of the closest ganger to check, opening him up for a headshot surprise on the other side of the door from you. Likewise, if you are standing in darkness when this happens, the other ganger will only hear the gunshot and only see the dead body. While he goes to investigate, you can line up another shot from a safe distance. As for an enemy to see you in the dark, they have to be right on top of you. Functionally speaking, enemies can't hear the Reaper unless he attacks, so getting behind an enemy in a dark room is a win scenario. Where this becomes tricky is the placement of lights. Lights for the most part are connected to switches that turn off the whole set in a room, but the switch can be in the middle of enemy territory, leading to situations where you have to fight in the light. This is where the aforementioned trickery plays its hand with door knocking and later on room peeking when doors become automatic. You can purposely be seen to grab enemy attention for an ambush in a dark room. You can shoot out the lights as switches, simply just turn them off, or you can use vents or cover. Most decorative objects in Deadbolt can be used as cover for when a firefight is unavoidable. As long as you aren't peeking your head out to shoot, facing the wrong direction, or a melee foe gets on top of you, cover fully protects the Reaper if leaving him a sitting duck. See, while you do have buyable main and sidearms from Charon, bought with souls from completing levels, though souls are a one-time thing, thus spend wisely, and I think they're tied to the ranking system, but don't quote me as, well, ranking seems random. Every weapon sans melee, which you can throw in the case of the knife and hammer, uses ammo. Sitting behind cover does you no favors without a loaded gun or weapon to use. Movement is far more effective, as once a firefight pops off, most, if not everyone, will be on alert in the nearest vicinity. To help with evasion, some stages have vents that you can teleport through to reach other parts of buildings. This can keep enemies distracted, as while they go look for you in one area, you can start picking off stragglers. Noted, however, is that some vents need to be opened via valve releases. Though Charon does provide weapons for your main and side, he doesn't give out ammo, so prepare to solid snake it when your chosen main and side go empty. While you can always switch out your arsenal before a level begins at the Reaper's car, this is a one-time deal, and once you begin a building for real, you can't switch. The lineup of weapons include a healthy amount of pistols, a few shotguns here and there, some automatics, and a few specialty cases. It can't be understated that headshots are important to both killing enemies and conserving ammo, but each gun has different stats, usually determinable by the aiming reticle growing the farther it gets away from you. A shotgun at a distance will spread more than a pistol or rifle, but will do more damage because of its pellets. A silencer dampens sound at the cost of weakening a gun, things of that nature. With a good variety of weapons and a bit of guile, even the crowdiest of rooms can be picked apart. Speaking of, enemies are separated by gang and subtype. 4 in total, the gangs are the Zombie Kings, the Thousand-Year Royals, the Dredged, and the Demons. From there, you have standard gunmen, melee attackers, the heavy unit bouncers, and some unique threats for each gang. A big deal of Deadbolt is how you approach a stage. Nothing is stopping you from going full Wick mode or becoming a silent assassin. How you want to tackle a stage is mostly up to you and what you bring. Most weapons have a place and use, making experimentation and understanding the core mechanics of how sound and light work in regard to your threats beyond important. Here and there, however, are a few gimmick levels like burning drug supplies or dealing with a boss. These add an extra layer to your tasks, like having to puzzle your way out of a paranoid bomber's funhouse filled with traps. Probably the best aspect of Deadbolt gameplay-wise, as the killer soundtrack and its implementation is something that has already been applauded by me, is the variability of the levels. Outside of a relative few, one of which I will get to, as it honestly is such an annoying hiccup in the lineup, how you want to tackle a stage is completely up to you. Before that though, the weapon selection, both pre-gaming and on-site procurement, is solid. Your standard armament, the 32, not only hits pretty meatily and can be easily down with headshots, the spread on it isn't too wild, nor does it fire slowly. Death and Taxes, the direct upgrade, gives 2 for 12 shots, allowing some flexibility between finesse and rampage. Of the first pickup weapons, both the knife and the hammer are useful for stealthy incursions at door frames, as solo foes can't fight back, but the real power of the two comes in their throwability. Only a scant few enemies can survive a knife to the chest or hammer to the face at any velocity. The ones that can still take a high amount of damage. For both starting off an encounter, whether sneakily or loud, one knife or hammer can immediately turn the tide in your favor, and what's more, both are among the cheapest of the viable sidearms. Of the two, the knives edge slightly past their blunt brethren solely because kitchens contain at least 4 for your needs, making them great holdout or lure rooms. A set piece with the knives features this heavily luring 4 enemies via microwave to a bladed doom. Continuing with the sidearms, while the mouse gun is a derringer that encapsulates all the problems of a defense pistol, low ammo and weak body damage, the fact that it can headshot with no damage penalty means it can take out standard goons with a well-placed shot. Because you can knock on doors or hide in shadows to manipulate threats into position, it's easy to play to the advantage of the mouse gun for some quick kills. Its accuracy is off the charts as well. Then there's the blunderbuss. Good weapon? No. Fun weapon? Well, it's an old-fashioned hand cannon shotgun, so you tell me. Of the classical firearm era of the early days of black powder and gunpowder, the blunderbuss has a special place in my heart because it's the weaponization of any random object you can find and shove into the barrel, like how penny shot is for shotguns. Effective? Yeah, if you're standing 20 meters or closer, otherwise you're hitting the neighbor's dog because it's smoothbore. That's why rifling's so great. On the other hand, you ain't blowing a golf ball-sized hole into any ruffian. You'll be finding the remains of chunky red salsa, and that's it. Back to the main arms, the Revenant is definitely the one main arm that fails to stand out because its higher damage doesn't mean much when the Headhunter is standing right next to it. To equate the gun, it basically fires the same cartridge as the bolt action you can find in the game, meaning while it does fire slowly, it lacks any spread and is laser accurate. Where you point it is where the bullet is going to go, and they don't call it the Headhunter for nothing. Most threats, barring the especially sturdy, wind up with a bad case of no head, though while I would recommend the Headhunter as an immediate buy for a first-time player, it only comes with 5 shots. Be accurate or be dead, as you ain't firing from the hip with this one, unlike the menagerie of other pistols. That's where the likes of the 9 and 10mm have you covered, as both are solid and reliable if lacking in stopping power for the former, and being a rarity in the latter. Sometimes all-rounders have their usage, though the silenced 9mm punches above its brother's weight due to its utility. While drained further of stopping power, making body shots almost worthless, the silencer mutes the gunshot, allowing for additional tactics to be used like light shooting. Can't find a switch or want to prevent enemies from turning one on again? A silent gun has a knack for acting as a permanent off switch. Because I'm on this topic, the same can be said for the silent submachine guns, the tactical and PDW, and shotgun, though the subguns favor a utilitarian approach with their generally awful damage and spread, while the shotgun might be the best weapon in the game. I feel like I can say that for every shotgun because the raw power on display is one word away from a Pantera album. Not much can survive a full-on blast from any of the shotguns, and because most threats you can either maneuver into close range for a buckshot handshake or are already in your face, the spread and lack of range aren't even detrimental. There is a reason why the silent shotgun costs how much it does because it's a skeleton key for any lock. If guns were keys and bodies locks. About the only other pieces that rival the shotguns are the actual rifles of the game, the old world, the bolt action, and the burst. Besides some ammo issues for the burst, all 3 perform about as well as you think they should, their only drawback their rarity. You only find old world and bolts with the dredged and burst with demons. Rounding out the weapons are the other sets of submachine guns, which aren't bad, most come with the ability to penetrate, but they feel like a stepping stone between the regular small arms into the rifles, and the specialties like the landmines, grenade launchers, and scythe. All do big damage, but are offset by their clunk. Trickery with the landmines, splash damage with the launchers, and range with the scythe. That said, all are fun to use as well. What helps though is that the enemy gangs mostly have their own identities even among the subdivision of units. While the general structure of the rogues gallery includes gunmen, melee units, and bouncers, the differences between the zombies, royals, and dredge couldn't be more divergent. Befitting their lowly nature, zombie gunmen and melee units are the lowest of the low. Easy to trick and not that frightening if they spot you. It's ironic that their most dangerous basic unit is the beheaded regular grunts because of their twitchiness and durability, something that the bouncers share to make up for their dim-wittedness. They're a perfect starter gang and stepping stone to the royals. Royal gunmen and melee units move faster, are seemingly less stupid, and can ambush from ceilings. Their bouncers have the phylactery gimmick to make them more imposing, they have a unique unit in the shape of the PDW carrying nightcrawlers, and they punish inaccuracy in their clubs with the patrons. Oh, and their weapon lineup is higher grade than the zombies. Still, they aren't dredged or the demons. Forgoing gangbanger armaments, the dredged and demons act like an armed militia or private military. The standard across the board is a rifle, a Kalashnikov for the Bone Boys, and some form of the M16 for the Red Hots, making even solo encounters dangerous due to the ever-present specter of getting wall-banged. Long corridors become death traps when attempting to peek, the D&Ds getting aided by their melee brothers to help tie you up either in numbers like with the demon delinquents or by sheer force of will like with the dredged sergeants. And there are also the mini-gunner demons who will rip and tear until it is done, and the liches who can revive their fellows. The roster of gangers make the level sets each feel unique, while also upping the ante where the bosses play their part. These are the best levels as it heightens the cat and mouse gameplay to the zenith. The likes of Val tracing you through her stage to take her shot, or the Madam forcing you to get creative to destroy her soul jars. The final duel in Home Sweet Home is an excellent way to end Deadbolt, as it puts all you know about the game into execution, since you have to rely on limited weapon drops while dealing with the dredged. It can't be said that Hopoo doesn't know how to make enjoyable bosses, though where things get a bit muddy is when Deadbolt strays away from solid foundation. Force Conversion. Probably the only fundamentally bad level in Deadbolt, as it forgoes a lot of its charm to instead drag you for a 60-second stage. Not only is it a particularly challenging level home to the Royals and Dredged, who will eat you up in a straight gunfight, which isn't a problem, the layout of the stage is against you from square one, making the enemy comp frustrating. To begin, FC has some qualms with the weapon shop, as poor shopping means you'll have a hell of a time getting past the front door. It's a litmus test for your spending, as if you've picked up the Headhunter or any of the shotguns, hooray, you'll make it through the first section with some time to spend in part 2. Owning none of those weapons, or even a throwable sidearm like the knife or hammer, means taking time to land shots you don't have. Outside of your personal arsenal, all you get is a sledgehammer, Tommy gun, a silenced PDW, and a 10mm pistol to hold you over, 2 of which have some usage, but are only dropped at the midway points of the stage on the first and second floors respectively. That's 2 dredge gunners and a sergeant and a numerous amount of royals you have to fight through to get to decent firepower. On a time limit. The sledgehammer is so gimmicky and slow that royal chasers will easily knife you to death, and the PDW lacks penetration like the Tommy gun, making the final onslaught of royal bouncers and dredged impossible to deal with. Oh yeah, back to the beginning, the front door is locked, and if you even attempt to unlock it, that's a dead run because of the enemy density. You have to knock so your attempt won't get snuffed out on floor 2. By the way, floor 1 has 2 hanging royals that will spot you if you enter through the entrance into the dance hall, where any stray shooting can aggro dancing royals, which in of itself is a reset. Haste makes waste, but slow and steady is a death sentence. In turn, floor 2 can suffer from randomness because you have to rely upon the likes of the Tommy gun, which can put the dead back down, but bullet spread is a factor leading to a bouncer or a sergeant popping off because of either missing bullets or hit stun not being on your side. It leads to this boring level structure where instead of thinking of ways to deal with my threats whether head on or by acting the ghost, I'm funneled down a singular path of how the level is supposed to go. I don't feel clever like in the other stages for taking advantage of environmental objects or luring foes away to dark rooms or tricking them with movement. Force conversion is ramming your head against the wall until you figure out which are the weakest bricks in sequence, then bashing them in the correct order. It doesn't help that of the 4 gangs, the Royals have the most annoying gimmicks. Mainly the bouncers and the melee units I've dubbed chasers. While the regular thug can be troublesome, I like how their ceiling crawling works with alerts like in bottle service, where you can aggro the ones in the main room so later on there's no one in it giving you a place to plan out from. The night crawlers aren't too bad either, though they do lack a gimmick besides holding on to silent PDWs. No, the chasers will probably be your least favorite standard threat, as not only are they blistering fast, about as, if not faster than hellhounds, their attack animation is wonky in the worst way, both for and against you. Their lunges wind-up acts as a soft dodge for the chasers, as when they get right on top of you, they hop ever so slightly forward in a way that makes landing shots actually quite difficult. You can have one almost dead to rights, only for that blasted attack sending your head a-rolling. And most of the time when a chaser is dancing the Blades dance, you aren't aiming your shots, you're panic firing. the thought of compensating for the change in hurtbox will be the last thing on your mind. On the opposite side of the spectrum, their lunge is predictable in its length and travel distance. In a one-on-one, you can legitimately beat up a chaser with fists alone by way of awkward tango. Their lunge makes them effectively useless as long as you move towards their knives. Paradoxical in all tenses of the word, surrounding the chasers in this miasma of strangeness. They're a pain to fight in groups and while panicking, but can easily be tricked by simple movements. They're simultaneously dangerous and pathetic, which leaves them in a bizarre position within the roster. For a more concrete diatribe, the Royal Bouncers and a few of the higher-ups of the gang have the phylactery gimmick. Body and spirit have been separated, so while phylactery remains, the bound will continue its existence infinitely. While not a problem with the bosses, as usually the whole stage revolves around dealing with their spirit fragments, previously mentioned Madame Stella earning a spot next to Val as one of the best stages in the game, the basic Royal Bouncers can clog up level progression with their revives. Rooms can become no-go zones if enough bouncers propagate in any density. Magic number 2. Prepared to be splattered with their shotguns, but the problem doesn't stop there. Other enemies can get on the fun, as this is when bullet penetration plays a part. If you can't shoot through all the fodder to knock out the bouncers, that's a pellet sandwich. Which brings me to the weapons. The sledgehammer is mostly a joke of a weapon. Great for locking down doorways, not much else. It can't even hit more than one enemy, a wrinkle that all melee weapons share. Sharing in the memery is the blunderbuss. Undead Nightmare this ain't, though, for as bad as a sidearm it is, one shot, loud like an atom bomb, and awful spread, the blunderbuss is a blunderbuss. It's like getting a fish kill in TF2. The flashbang rounds out the trio as it's far too situational to be effective. You're better off bringing a lethal sidearm to rip the gangers free from this mortal coil instead of placing them in the timeout corner. Lastly, the ranking system is esoteric. I don't know how to describe it besides weird. For example, you can die around 15 times in a stage and still get 4 out of 5 stars. You can also complete a stage flawlessly and get 3. Trying to understand it is like figuring out the Voynich manuscript, something I'll leave to the desperate and partially insane to solve. Deadbolt is a charming little strategy shooter well worth your time, with a multitude of weapons and approaches, plus some great level structures easily outshine some of the weaker aspects of the game. I can overlook a few weak weapons and stage gimmicks if the total is better than the parts. Add in player-made stages and you're in for a fun time. What can I say? Sometimes I want to tackle something a bit shorter and sweeter to offset pouring I don't know how many hours into a longer project. Speaking of, I think the next video will be the last video of the year because I want it to be big like it usually is. What's it going to be? Well, I haven't decided yet. A few topics have passed my mind that sound good, but I haven't finalized anything yet. Sometimes the mind do be a ball of neurons firing away. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the Showtime reels. November, the continuation of Halloween with World of Horror as the Showtime reel. With its actual release, time to count up the differences. And as always, this showing of Deadbolt is over, but stay tuned for our next feature. Whatever my ancient reptilian brain has decided on. Wait a second.